To understand and analyze post-colonialism, we must first take a look at colonialism. Colonialism can be defined as one nation's power or control over another area or people. In film, colonialism has a very long history. A notable example is The Birth of a Nation, a 1915 film directed by D.W. Griffith. The film is incredibly controversial and undeniably racist. It portrays black people, who are played by white people in blackface, as unintelligent and aggressive. It also paints the Ku Klux Klan as a heroic group. This undoubtedly racist film is still considered a staple in film history, thus demonstrating the roots film history has in colonialism, and why post-colonial film is so important. Post-colonial film refers to films that deal with the lasting effects of colonialism. These are films that aim to unteach the racist and problematic views a colonial society has perpetuated for generations. These films defy the marginalization caused by colonialism and aim to change film as a whole, abolishing any lasting effects colonialism continues to share. The idea of opposing oppression can be looked at in parallel to bell hooks ideology, most notably the idea of oppositional gaze. Bell hooks describes the oppositional gaze as the act of engaging in black people's right to stare and inherently assert power that has been previously withheld or oppressed throughout history. Thinking back to the definition of colonialism, where power is a key aspect, we can see how post-colonialism is essentially asserting power that has been previously oppressed by a colonizing nation. Indigenous cinema is very similar to post-colonial film, in that indigenous peoples were oppressed and dealt with the consequences of colonization. The key difference that separates indigenous cinema from being part of post-colonial film is that indigenous cinema and indigenous people are still dealing with a colonial society. In Canada, colonialism is a lasting problem that is still being dealt with. However, indigenous cinema has a long history in Canada that can be traced back to 1968 with the founding of the Indian Film Crew, which was created to combat the consistent telling of indigenous stories from a non-indigenous perspective. 1968 also saw the release of The Ballad of Crowfoot, directed by Willie Dunn, which was the first film directed by an indigenous person in Canada.
Why the sorrow? Maybe there'll be a better tomorrow.
There have been many Indigenous films released since then, and in 2000, the Indigenous Independent Digital Filmmaking Program, formerly the Aboriginal Film and TV Production Training Program, was launched at Capilano. This was in response to the overwhelming demand for Indigenous filmmakers. A 2010 film, Real Injun, analyzes the often negative representation of Indigenous people in Hollywood. This negative portrayal of Indigenous people was previously very prominent in Hollywood. Disney's Peter Pan features a very problematic portrayal of Indigenous peoples in 1953, which has since been acknowledged by the studio. Peter Pan is one of the select films that now features a non-skippable disclaimer before viewing on Disney+.
Belongs to the Algonquin group. Quite savage, you know.
Let's go get him.
Come on, we'll get him. Gentlemen. First, we must plan our strategy.
What strategy?
A plan of attack. The initial phase is an encircling.
Yeah.
Indians. Indian is cunning, but not intelligent. Therefore, we simply surround them and take them by surprise.
Oh,
Chief.
for many moons, red man fight pale face lost boys. Sometime you win, sometime we win.
Current-day Hollywood is not free of bad representations, and a film as recent as 2015's The Ridiculous Six shows an incredibly offensive representation of Indigenous people. 15 Indigenous actors walked off the set of the satirical Western due to the script being disrespectful towards Indigenous people. Netflix responded to backlash by defending the jokes as satirical, claiming the cast was in on the joke.
You lucky smoking fox. White knife all man. Bravest of all braves.
Not brave. Foolish. I want to be wife, not widow.
Afternoon, ladies.
As described in Real Injun, it's important to hear Indigenous people's stories as told by them. Even in circumstances where a film is not inherently racist or problematic, it is offensive to see a white person try to tell you about your own culture. Through this lens, Indigenous cinema is about making films to educate white oppressors on what it is to be Indigenous, and thus halting the negative representations prominent in Hollywood.
Sister Nakia, my prince, we are home.
In Marvel's 2018 film Black Panther, we are shown a hypothetical African nation that was untouched by colonization and is home to precious resources. The resulting country of Wakanda is an extremely powerful nation with technology far superior to that of any other.
This never gets old.
This idea is inherently post-colonial as it highlights the negative repercussions of colonialization by simply not featuring them in Wakanda. Wakanda is the vision of an African country untouched by colonizers, which leads to thoughts on how other African countries or cities would look if they had not faced colonization. Although Indigenous cinema isn't necessarily a part of post-colonial film, it undeniably supports the same ideology of a people making films to defy and educate their previous oppressors. Movies like Black Panther, Rafiki, and Blood Quantum are all incredible films that tell interesting stories from a non-colonizer's perspective. But above that, they send a message to people in a colonial society, illustrating the need for change.